It's shocking, right? You're shocked, right? I was shocked. But certainly I was in no position to pass judgment. Remember, I'm working in bars, doing a crazy high wire act, so naturally I was drinking like a fish. And again, it's the 80s, so cocaine was everywhere, including in my nose. Oh, God, it was the perfect drug for us. All any of us wanted to do was stay up all night and talk about the minutia of comedy and what geniuses we were and what hacks everybody else was. And we wanted to have sex with waitresses, the other thing coke was really good for. But this was heroin. That was different, right? But that was Ricky's argument, that it wasn't any different than what everybody else was doing. It was just a downer instead of an upper, and he just didn't like uppers. He didn't even like coffee. He liked Quaaludes, which they didn't make anymore, or drinking. But that was time-consuming and messy and ultimately not as good. He just liked the way heroin made him feel. And I think that is the big selling point with heroin, isn't it? The feeling. It's not the handy carrying case. He snorted a little bit on weekends. Who the fuck was I to say anything? I'm slinging jokes in bars. He's Superman. But what I couldn't wrap my brain around quite was that his drug use didn't affect his religiosity. If anything, his religiosity was escalating. I remember the first time I saw him laying tefillin. I was stupefied. For those of you not in the know, laying tefillin is, by my reckoning, hardcore religious weirdness. There are these little leather boxes that contain tiny parchments with passages from the Torah on them. And during morning and evening prayers, you strap one to your head and one to your arm. Yeah. Before him, I don't think I'd ever even seen it done. And I remember once I confronted him about what I saw as the contradiction, the hypocrisy of doing the one thing and doing the other. And his attitude was, what do you mean? What hypocrisy? What contradiction? Nowhere in the Torah does it say it's not all right to make yourself feel good. We drink wine on the Sabbath. Well, yeah, I don't know the Bible that well. I know it doesn't say thou shalt not shoot smack, but I assume it's in there somewhere between some lines, something. I halfway expected him to tell me he had a bracha he said as he heated up the spoon. Or maybe he used the tefillin straps to tie off. Except he only snorted, so didn't matter. Oh, and then there were the dates. He was getting into his early 30s and thinking maybe it was time to settle down, start a family. So he starts going on these prearranged, set-up dates set up by the Yenta at his synagogue. So he's going out with Emily Lightstein and Wendy Isaacson from Temple Beth, whatever the hell. And hey, what a surprise, those dates not really working out so well. I mean, I'm like, dude, you're looking at a pretty narrow target. You're looking for a beautiful woman who's going to keep a kosher house and split a nickel bag with you. Maybe she's out there, but she's probably taken. I was traveling as I began working more as a stand-up, and you'll be happy to know that I'm completely done with that surfing metaphor. I think I rode that to shore. But as I became more successful, I started coming back to New York less frequently, but I was hearing the stories, and it seems like things were getting worse and worse, kind of the way you would expect with a heroin addict. From my sister Stephanie and brother-in-law Mark, I heard stories of him roaming Alphabet City in the middle of the night with junkies and pushers and whores, oh my. And the only thing that made any sense to me was that he somehow needed to be two people. That Superman needed his Clark Kent. I mean, Ricky used to be a rebel. He was a long-haired hippie going to race riots and 4 dead in Ohio, man. And now he went to work in a blue suit for the man. Fuck it, he was the man. I guess running in Alphabet City with druggies and whores made him feel like something more, like what he used to be wasn't just a figment of his imagination. he was supposed to show up at my sister and brother-in-law's house for dinner one night. Didn't show up. They start getting nervous, start making phone calls. Lo and behold, he's been picked up by an undercover cop. He was trying to buy a point, a needle, from an undercover cop. Hey, but he only snorted. What do you need the needle for? He would have been disbarred had not Mark dispatched his attorney to get it knocked down to a lower charge. And maybe getting disbarred would have been a good thing. He would have hit bottom sooner, you know. But dodging that bullet, I think, made him feel even more invincible. Kept on going. He shows up at Mark and Stephanie's house one morning on his way to work, fucked up out of his mind, as Mark put it. And Mark prevailed upon Ricky not to go to work that way, to in fact take a week off, go with them up to the country. They had a place, dry out, clean up. Ricky agrees. Before he gets in the car, Mark says, all right, Ricky, give me your stash. Ricky says, I don't have anything. Ricky, I'm not stupid. Every junkie has a stash. Now give it to me. I'm not holding anything. Goes back and forth like that till finally Ricky relents and gives him his stash. After the 2-hour ride up to the country, they got out of the car, and Mark said, all right, Ricky, now give me the rest of it. What are you talking about? I don't have anything. Look, I can beat the shit out of you and search you until I find it, or you can just give it to me. Mark had Ricky by a couple of inches, at least 50 pounds, plus Mark knew some martial arts, plus Ricky was a junkie. He gave him the rest of his stash. Ricky starts going through classic withdrawal, getting sick, train spotting, everything. But 3 or 4 days into it, Ricky remembers he's got some time-sensitive documents on his desk in his office that his secretary is going to have to drive up. What their relationship exactly was is unclear, or if in fact she even was his secretary. But the way his pupils were dilated after she left, it was clear she drove up more than time-sensitive documents. What eventually happened was Ricky got Hep C, generally caught from sharing dirty needles. He came clean, so to speak, to my parents, admitted that he was an addict. He had to get out of Manhattan. He quit or was fired from his job, I don't even know. And he moved back in with them on the Jersey Shore to recuperate again, this time shot with his own gun. When he was well enough, he moved out. He knew he couldn't go back to Manhattan. He moved to Morristown, New Jersey. Morristown, presumably for its large Hasidic population. And that's where he seriously began to study Hebrew, the Torah, and the Talmud. The Talmud, Gentiles? A record of rabbinic discussion of Jewish law and ethics. And he became very close with the young rabbi and his family at his temple. And when that young rabbi and his family moved to Israel and called and told Ricky that there was room at the yeshiva nearby and that he could stay with them, Ricky moved to Israel. So Ricky moved to Israel. I was moving too, from my 20s to my 30s, and from San Francisco to Los Angeles. And while the first year and a half in Los Angeles I spent mostly in the middle of my living room floor, rocking back and forth in a fetal position, crying, I eventually landed a job writing and performing on an HBO sketch show. So I was moving from road comic to professional in the entertainment industry. And without any conscious effort, I moved from someone who did drugs to someone who used to. A couple of years later, the call comes, Ricky's getting married. I was pretty flush at the time, on hiatus from whatever I was working on, so I decided I was going to fly to Jerusalem for the wedding. I got to meet his betrothed, his fiancée, Yael, though, to be honest, it wasn't much of a meeting. She didn't speak any English, and I don't speak any Hebrew. Though that's not true. I could have sung her a psalm about how great God is. Hey, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, am I right?